I'm Alanna Airitam. I'm a fine art photographer who specializes in portraiture. I'm self-taught, and as I started getting my studio together, I started working with very minimal equipment. I didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't have a lot of gear on hand. So it presented a little bit of challenge and obstacles along the way that I had to learn how to overcome creatively. And that's what I really loved about having and working with very little equipment, was that it pushed me to find new solutions and new ways of working with what I already had in my home studio. There's lots of technology available today that you could use, like tethering and different apps applied to your cameras and all sorts of lights, and you can get really out there with the technology that's available to create different types of portraits, whether it's self-portraiture or you're taking photos of other people. But even to this day, I still like to use a lot of the minimal gear that I used in the beginning. Sometimes I incorporate new stuff into it, but I really do try to keep it as minimal as possible. And I would love to show you how you could use some of this equipment in your own home studio to take self-portraitures, especially in this time of sheltering in place. So let me show you a little bit about of the gear that I use in my studio. So here's some of the gear that I use to do a self-portrait. Very minimal gear. I start with, obviously, you're going to need a tripod to put your camera on, to mount your camera. Here we've got camera. I've been using a Canon 5D Mark II, and I'll usually use either a 50 or an 85 depending upon the type of shot that I'd like to get. These are the two lenses that I primarily use in the studio for any type of portraiture. I've got my CF cards, of course. You're going to need that for your camera, and a shutter release. There are shutter releases that are cordless, but this is the one that I started off with. It works fine, so I just continue to use it, and I have neat little creative ways of hiding the cord. For the lighting, you're going to need your transmitters, and I'm using Pocket Wizards. I've got I believe this is a 24-inch beauty dish, and I've got a diffuser over it. That's going to be for my key light. I'm going to be mounting it onto the C-stand so that I can get a good overhead hang on that beauty dish. I'll be sitting on a stool, which is easy for me to do when I'm doing self-portraiture. It gives myself a place that's marked on the floor that I know that I'm going to be all the time, so that the relation to the camera never changes. Because there's a lot of back and forth that you end up having to do, getting up and checking the camera and sitting back down again, so it's good to have some sort of marker to keep you in place. I'm going to be mounting my other light onto just a basic light stand. This is one that came with my lights. I would go so far as to say, get a decent light stand so that you don't, knock over a light. Sometimes these things end up being pretty flimsy, so that's just an FYI. I'm going to be using today these two Bowens Geminis, basic, simple lights, but they get the job done, and they're super easy to use, and I like the color, and I'm just really happy with them. The cords to obviously plug the lights in, and I'm going to be using a medium-size octagon box as my fill. Also on the C-stand, I highly recommend using sandbags for both my light stand and the C-stand so that things don't knock over. And this is the basic setup. Oh, backdrop. You can or cannot, it's up to you. I like to use a thunder gray backdrop. That's what I use for most of my portraiture. I like the color. It gives me a lot of versatility. I can pull myself in and out and get darker tones or lighter tones depending upon what I want. But this is my go-to staple for most of my portraiture. So for my setup, and what I've chosen to do today is obviously have my camera mounted on the tripod. I've gone ahead and I chose to use the 50 today because I want to have a longer, more full body shot as opposed to the 85, which is very, very close up. So we're using the 50. I'm going to be sitting on the stool over here, and like I was saying before, there's, you can do whatever you want in terms of markers. The stool for me is great when I'm doing a self-portrait because I can easily, I know exactly where I'm going to sit. It never moves, and then when I get up to have to check my camera or like move a light, I know that when I go to sit back on that stool, it's in the same spot in relation to the camera, so nothing changes there. Using the C-stand and the beauty dish as my key light, and I currently have it set to 2. That is, these lights are actually a little bit closer than I would normally set it up, but for the purpose of this video, I kind of wanted to have things a little more compact for you. Normally I would have it a little bit further away and have the arm sort of out more at an angle and pointed in, but this works for today for you guys. Anyway, it's sort of at a 45-degree angle. I try to keep my key lights at that angle. And then my fill placed anywhere that it needs to go in order to fill in the light. Right now, when I was doing tests, I saw that the fill wasn't up high enough or wasn't close enough to me, so my shadow underneath my chin was too dark. So I decided to bring it in a little bit closer and turn up the light from a 1 to a 1.5. That gave me just enough light to go underneath my neck to take away that dark shadow. So this is also at sort of a 45-degree angle, but there are different lighting setups that you can do more of like a butterfly or more sort of more straight on, but this is close to what I would normally do. Like I was saying, I would bring it out a little bit further, but this works for the purposes of today. In terms of how far or close I usually place myself or my sitter from the backdrop is highly dependent on the look that I want. Obviously, moving closer to the backdrop is going to light the backdrop more, and you'll be able to see the texture of the backdrop a little bit more. If I move myself further away from the backdrop, then it's going to be a darker back, and you won't be able to see the definition of the paper as much. So it's all dependent on what look you're going for. I have my shutter release, and like I was saying earlier, you can get a cordless version of this, but this is what I started with. It's a lot of cord, but it works for my needs. And I will be sitting in the stool, and because it's going to be more of a longer angle as opposed to just cutting off here, I'm going to put this down by my foot and press it with my toe as opposed to holding it in my hand. So you just have to be a little bit crafty with getting that to work. Sometimes I don't, and it's a little bit frustrating. Or there's a lock on this particular system, so if you don't press it down and press it to the side instead, it sort of locks it in place. So it's kind of annoying, but it works. And so, you just use what you've got at home. None of this stuff is super expensive, but it works great, and it does the job. I have my camera already set up to the right place, and I'm using, I'm going on F10 at a speed of 125, and I've got my key light, which is the beauty dish, set to 2, and the fill set to a 1.5. Normally I wouldn't have this fill so close, but for purposes of this video, I thought you'd like to see it all kind of on the stage. Now, depending upon the type of shoot that I'm doing and the pose that I'm doing, I would conceal this in various different ways. If I'm doing a shot from here up, obviously it's just easy to keep it in the hand. If I'm doing something that is a little more full body, I usually tuck it right under my toe and I press the button with my toe, and I can easily take the cord out and post if I need to, but I really just try to hide it behind something. I also work with a lot of props, so it's easy for me to tuck it behind props or behind my dog, who always seems to want to participate in my self-portraits. So yeah, what I would do now is just pose myself and press the shutter release with my big toe. And something like that. And then I will come over here and take a look at this and see what we got. Now I'm not super happy with this. Maybe I want to do a different type of a pose where it didn't look so dorky. The look that I like, just having a tiny bit more light in the back. Not too much. So let's see what that looks like. And then you just make adjustments from there. You know, you just play with it a little bit and make whatever adjustments you need to get the look that you want. And what I like about doing this is this is how I normally work, even if I have someone coming in to sit for me. I always do a test first, and because I'm usually the only person available for that, I'll set up the lights. But sitting here, regardless of whether I'm photographing myself or photographing someone else, it's good to sit in the place and look at the lights and just, you know, like imagine the angle of the lights. Like it's easy to see it from this position, much easier than from out there. So always sit wherever your sitter is going to sit and test it out. So most of my shoots always start with a self-portrait anyway. And the shutter always goes off when you don't want it to. All right, let's try that again. There. A little bit better. So once I get the light right and I'm happy with where things are placed, then I can go through the process of trying to find a decent shot, you know, adjusting my poses, finding a good angle. Certain emotions and moods. So that's a little bit about how I work in the studio. I hope it was helpful, and thank you guys so much for joining me here today in my studio. It's been an amazing place to work, and I want to thank the Athenaeum for inviting me to share with you guys. And please take this time. We have so much time to play and explore. If you don't have lights at home, you can use a reflector. If you don't have a reflector, use a white card. There's plenty of things that you have in your home to make great portraits on your own right now, and so it's a great opportunity that we all have to play and just experiment and try out new things to make great shots. My website is alannaairitam.com, so I invite you to come and check it out and see some of my work there, and also on Instagram at Airitam. Thank you guys so much. See you guys on the other side.